Some months ago, a University of Toronto professor specializing in Indigenous health was a guest on this program. In the midst of one of her answers, she said something off-topic but quite provocative, that the Government of Canada was essentially keeping Indigenous people in crisis in order to get unfettered access to their riches of their land. We instantly thought that would make for a fascinating debate. And so we'll have it now. We welcome Suzanne Stewart, Director of the U of T's Waakaban Bryce Institute for Indigenous Health; Tom Flanagan, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Calgary and author of First Nations, Second Thoughts; Linda DeBossegay, former Chief of the Chiging First Nation on Manitoulin Island; and Frances Widdowson, co-author of Disrobing the Aboriginal Industry, the Deception Behind Indigenous Cultural Preservation.
Now, when we talk about the First Nation Lands Management Act and the First Nations Property Ownership Act, those pieces of legislation simulate what the Dawes Act did in the United States in the 1800s, where it creates an individualized ownership of land, which theoretically improved the economy or well-beings of the people, and that's similarly what the First Nations Lands Management Act and the First Nations Property Ownership Act is based on. So that supports a completely Marxist attitude where it says, we all must be equal, and in order to contribute to equally to the society. And then it creates different classes where the haves have and the have-nots have not. And all of this put together from this Western view supports the government by keeping our Indigenous people poor and capitalizing on our poverty. There are many First Nations and territories who are wanting to self-determine, who are wanting to get to that point of self-government. And the starting off point is addressing those historic wrongs, the historic traumas. Without addressing the historic trauma, we can't expect a human being to actually want to move forward built on a history of distrust, hurt, and basically raping our lands. So we need to create that relationship first. And I've read the works of both of yourselves, and I believe that, when you combine that with the Anishinaabe view, you do have a lot of good research, but it's very, very biased, very one-sided. And in our worldview, the Indigenous perspective, anything that we do to get us out of our poverty has to be First Nation led and First Nation driven, and not.
What's biased about their work?
It's very right wing. It doesn't talk about environment, land in the way we talk about environment and land, or honor, or truth, or humility. Any of those. It's very capitalist. It's very corporate, and it supports corporate Canada. It creates very good debates, and I think Miss Widdowson and Mr. Flanagan have been shielded by the veil of academia to be able to continue pressing what they talk about within their work.
But is what they've said empirically provably false?
Yes, I believe so.
I think they've been told that that's the way in which they're going to be able to live the life in the world today. And many people that I know actually pretend that they think that this is a beneficial way for people to live.
Okay, response over here.
Yeah, I don't think you have a right to talk about First Nations wellness. That has to come from the communities.
I'm here to
I'm
give my
talking
opinion
right now. So I was a youth who attempted suicide 3 times. How did I come out of it? Was my understanding who I was as an Indigenous person, as a woman, and I listened to my elders and I participate in ceremonies. Even as of today, I don't rely on the healthcare system of Canada. I rely on the teachings of the cultural practices and medicines that I have learned from my grandmother. So when you talk about the suicide and what's best for our youth, identity is what we need for our youth. Identity is what's going to empower them and make them strong. I'm 35 years old, and if I didn't find that in my early 20s, I would have been dead. If I waited for Canada to help me, I would have been dead. But when I turned to my elders, to my community, to my friends and my family, and asked for help, that's what got me out of it. So I disagree with you saying that going back doesn't do any justice. What we're trying to do is reclaim our identity and to allow our youth and our children to get that opportunity that I never had when I was young. So they're just getting that now. you know, and that's preserving our language, our culture, and our identity that ensure that we are a unique and diverse people of this country. We are the original people.
Do we have to acknowledge that what may work for European settler culture in terms of repairing, in terms of making progress, may not work for Indigenous people?
I